Hello, everybody. It is Sunday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined by Paul Zeise, our Post-Gazette sports columnist, for our Steelers post-game show after a 31-28 loss to the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field. Paul, I think there were some good things we saw today from this team, but obviously more bad than good for them to lose. Going to be a frustrating one, especially because the Ravens pick up a win against the New York Jets. So the AFC North race is now even. That lead that the Steelers had is gone. They have lost 4 out of 6 games. So there's a lot to sort through with Paul here. Before we do, we just want to remind you that the show is presented by FanDuel. We also want to thank Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Paul, before we dig into the nitty-gritty, what's your overall reaction to this loss that, despite not being, I think, the worst loss they've had all season, is going to be costly for them, just considering where they are in the schedule?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm a little confused. I mean, they had the ball at the 50-yard line there, didn't they? Is that pretty much where they were at? Yeah,
they were right around midfield.
Why not try a 65-yarder with Boswell? I mean, obviously that's a hard kick to make, but I mean, the guy has been money all year. I don't know. I feel like at the end there, you left something on the table because you didn't go with at least giving your best asset a shot to tie the game. I mean, I know that, maybe, it's a little bit out of his range, or, we saw the little red thing across the field, but I just don't get it. I feel like you got Boswell. Why not give him a shot? So that's my first thing. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe it was like the 48, and maybe it would have been like a 67-yarder or something. I don't know. But my first thought was at 50. I don't understand why it was at the 50-yard line or whatever. To me, I feel like you got to give Boswell a shot there. Maybe he doesn't make it. Okay, whatever. I don't know how anyone can give a hard time.
Do you think they were worried about rushing him onto the field, Paul?
Yeah, but I mean, you practice that all week long. I don't know. I don't like that. I don't think that's right. I feel like, a lot of people are going to point to Mason Rudolph. I know on the chat, a lot of people wanted to point to Mason Rudolph's fumble and, the interception and whatever. But, I mean, they scored 28 points in this game. What are you paying, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for your defense for if they can't figure out how to stop the Bears? And that's probably my impression, is that this game was probably more lost on defense than on offense. But again, of course, the offense left some plays out there as well.
Yeah, I guess let's start with the Mason Rudolph thing. Paul, he finishes the day in place of Aaron Rodgers, 24 for 31 for 171 yards, 5.5 on the average per throw. 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 86.9 passer rating. Really propped up the passing totals there on that last drive. I believe going into that final drive, he'd only thrown 24 times the entire game. Arthur Smith did not ask him to do much in place of Aaron Rodgers. Paul really seemed to want to lean on the running game, but as it became a shootout, how did you feel about the game that Arthur Smith called and staying kind of conservative there with the running game as much as he did?
Yeah, I kind of felt, I think that's one of the things they do when they have Mason Rudolph in the game, which is weird to me, is they, whenever Rudolph plays, they generally are very conservative with what, they ask him to do and how they try. And, it's almost like they try really hard to protect him from the standpoint of they don't want him to make big mistakes and all that other stuff. But I feel like, to me, they need to, once it becomes clear your defense is struggling and your defense is not able to stop the other team, consistently, I don't know. I feel like you have to try and do whatever you can do to outscore them if you have to. And I think that's what one of the biggest problems is. So, it feels to me like sometimes they don't allow Mason Rudolph to play the same way they allow some of these other quarterbacks that they've had to play. And it probably hampers him a little bit. The other part of it is, the interception that he threw, it wasn't like he threw it on the 5-yard line. I mean, the Bears were on the 43, which, okay, it's a shorter field, but your defense is allowed to make a stop. You don't have to allow a 57-yard drive. And I think that's part of the problem. To me, I keep going back to, I feel like Rudolph was fine. I think he was a little bit hamstrung, but I think the offense probably did enough to win the game, didn't they?
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, Paul. I thought the offense looked stilted and bad for good chunks of this game. They had the 2 long drives, but beyond that, you got 7 points off the turnover. So really it's a 21-point outing in that context. Could it have been worse? Have we seen worse? For sure. But in a game like that, I didn't think they were good enough. And it felt like that they just really didn't want to take those chances with Mason Rudolph. And I guess here's my question for you, Paul. Can we pump the brakes on the Mason Rudolph QB1? Because whatever impressions people have of him in their minds and this potential they feel like he has, even though he's now 30 years old at this point, it's clear through the last 5 years that Mike Tomlin does not fully trust the guy. And he's only going to ever be used as a backup quarterback to do backup quarterback stuff. I don't know. There's been a lot of discourse about, is he better than Aaron Rodgers already at this stage? I didn't see that today from him. So what was your read on how he played and the perception people have that, he's right, the horizon for him is just right over there and that he's going to suddenly break out in the NFL at age 30?
Well, I mean, I think that was foolish. And I think I probably wrote that a few times this week that I'd be very, very careful about anointing Mason Rudolph as anything other than a really good backup quarterback, which I think he is. I mean, I think if you look at the, grand scheme of backup quarterbacks, I mean, at least when you have Mason Rudolph in the game versus a lot of backups in this league, you have a chance to win the game. He puts you in position where you have a shot maybe to win the game. But the reality is, if you look at him as a whole, he probably isn't a starter. So, I think people got crazy and lost their mind because Aaron Rodgers had a bad week. The week before the Bengals game. He wasn't great in the Bengals game, but the Chargers game, he was terrible. But you have a bad game, that doesn't necessarily negate what you've actually meant to the Steelers and really what you've been in your career. So, I mean, backups are backups and starters are starters. I think that Mason Rudolph is a really good backup. And I think, even today, whatever you want to say about today, I mean, he gave them an opportunity maybe to win the game or whatever. It wasn't like they had, 30 yards of offense and scored 7 points or 6 points or something. I mean, they scored enough points that if their defense did what their defense usually is supposed to do, they have a shot to win the game, which is what you want from a backup. But I agree with you. Anybody that thinks he's more than that is a little ridiculous.
Well, and I think the hype train got rolling because of last week where you had the 2 long drives and you win the game. But I made the point on the post-game show, and I'll make it again, a lot of those throws were behind the line of scrimmage, and his guys were able to make plays with them, 15, 17-yard runs after the catch. And they didn't get that as much today, Paul. And it seemed like the Bears were ready for that type of thing, which is and they tried to force Mason Rudolph to throw downfield. And when he did, or when he had to, he obviously throws the interception, couldn't find guys downfield, held on to it a little too long, I think a couple of times, one of them leading to that fumble. So, yeah, it's just I haven't been sold on the Mason Rudolph argument. That doesn't mean that, if we see him for a couple more weeks here, then he won't have time to redeem himself. But I think you saw the limitations on display today. Paul, I did want to talk about DK Metcalf, especially on that first intercept. First of all, it was not a good day for him. Had the holding penalty that wiped out the touchdown. Obviously, they come back and get it anyway, but a bad penalty from him there. finishes the day with 5 catches for 22 yards. That's 4.4 on the average. 5 catches on the 8 targets, so didn't catch 3 of them. And then I thought on that interception, Paul, you just saw how bad he is in these combat catch situations and the difference between him and a George Pickens. And there seems to be a desire in Arthur Smith's offense to throw those types of balls, and he is consistently not making those plays right now.
I've said it a lot this week in various formats, Adam. There is not a more disappointing player that I can think of than DK Metcalf. Given when they got him what we thought he was going to be, the fact that they signed him up for 5 years and gave him $30 million a year, he should be so much more than he is. And I'm looking right now at the box score. I'm looking at it. He had 8 targets. I'm sorry, I can't imagine anybody, like for instance, Antonio Brown. If he had 8 targets, I can't imagine he'd have 22 yards. Just can't. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine any of the top receivers in the league actually would only have 22 yards, if they had 8 targets. So to me, I think it's one of those things where if you look at him, what he's supposed to be and what he is, I think those are probably 2 of completely different things, and that's a problem to me. He's got to be better than he is, and we keep saying it every week, Adam. We keep thinking that this is going to be the week when it happens. It just isn't happening, and I'm not sure exactly why. I mean, I feel like even, if he's maybe not quite what we thought he was, he still should be a lot better than he actually is.
I think the problem, Paul, is that he's just not very good on the outside right now, and they keep trying to draw up this catch and run stuff for him because that's all that's really working. And you kind of go back to the Vikings game and the long touchdown there, and that's when you were feeling best about him. But, these throws on the perimeter are just not working. So teams are able to push him inside. And then if they're not worried about him on the outside and they're not worried about anyone else on the outside, it's easier for them to track him down in these catch and run situations where they're throwing these, 3-4 yard patterns at the most, and then hoping he's going to be able to make some plays with his legs. And look, it worked in Ireland, but I think teams have started to pick up on that. And if you can't make those plays on the outside, you're not threatening defenses enough to not kind of consolidate their forces to stop you that way. Am I missing something?
Yeah, I mean, I think Adam, a lot of it comes back to what we've talked about, ad nauseum for 2 years, you and I. There's nobody else to scare these other teams. And so since there's nobody else to scare these other teams, they can do whatever they want to do to take DK Metcalf effectively out of games. He's got to be better. He's got to fight more. All that stuff I agree with. But again, they make it very, very hard on him because there's nobody else, as you just pointed out, that scares the other team. Period. Nobody. And, I think when you look at it from afar or up close, he's one of the easiest players that I can think of for other teams to take out of games simply because, A, I don't know that he's played as well as he needs to or can, and B, I mean, I don't know that the Steelers have a lot of options to try and take pressure off of him.
I agree, Paul. Let's talk a little bit about that final drive there as well. I know you didn't like the decision not to try to kick. I'll give them grace on that because I think if it was like a 40-yard field goal, certainly they had enough time to set up. I think Boswell would have liked a little more time to set up for a field goal as long as the one that they would have been attempting. I think it's not a high chance of success if you're trying to scramble people out there with 20 seconds left to kick almost a 70-yard field goal. I don't like the play calls that preceded it. You threw 2 passes short of the sticks into the middle of the field with no timeouts. What was the benefit there? Okay, maybe you catch and run for the first down, you spike the play. That was the only chance those plays had to succeed, and I think it magnifies what we were just talking about with DK Metcalf of they can't throw to the sideline right now. They can't, they threw the one to Gainwell, and he got out of bounds, but they can't throw to the outside and count on the receivers to even catch a 5-yard out and get out of bounds. Who do you fault more there? Do you fault Arthur Smith for the play calling, or do you fault the personnel for just not being able to do the things you need to do in that 2-minute situation to get those 10 yards to set you up for a field goal to extend the game?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that the play that I really hated was the third down play. You know, that felt a lot like bailing out before you needed to, you know what I mean? And I almost put that one on Mason Rudolph. I probably do put it on Mason Rudolph if I had to really look at it. The bottom line is, in that situation, you absolutely cannot, especially with no timeouts, cannot throw the ball 3 yards over the middle. You just cannot. You'd be better off actually just, spiking the ball or throwing it, out of bounds than that play. Because at that point, now the clock is ticking, and you really don't have, if you're Mike Tomlin, time to think about what you want to do there. By the same token, I can't imagine that they don't have better plays in their 2-minute offense than what we saw in the last, 30 seconds of that game. It just seems to me like a lot of this, some of it falls on Mason Rudolph. Some of it falls on Arthur Smith, though. Some of it falls on a lack of personnel. I mean, there's a combination of things. But to me, I think every team in the NFL has 2-minute plays and 2-minute drives. And that situation where, especially when you only need a field goal, to get 30, 25 or 30 yards or whatever they really needed in order to get into field goal range. So there's a lot of blame to go around. But to me, the design of the offense is always the biggest problem I have.
Yeah, that third down really, you're right. They would have been better off spiking it on that third down, or just not spiking it, but throwing it into the ground if what you wanted wasn't open there, because I think that's why they probably didn't kick the field goal, because it would have had to have been a scramble. You had less time on the real clock than you would have on the play clock. So you cost yourself the chance to give Boswell a chance there. So yeah, terrible decision, terrible execution, possibly terrible play call as well. Paul, I guess let's talk a little bit about these tight ends today. I keep hearing about how good they are and how Arthur Smith's going to unlock them, and then I look at the box score here. Darnell Washington, 2 catches for 22 yards. Jonnu Smith, 3 catches for 21. Pat Freiermuth, 3 for 19, obviously had the touchdown that pulled them within 3. Just not great. I mean, other teams don't seem to be nearly as afraid of them as you would need them to be to unlock DK Metcalf and maybe some of these other receivers. I mean, 60 yards between the 3 of them on the day, and that's just not good enough if you're going to invest as much in these guys as you have.
Well, I mean, again, the fact that they are so limited, for lack of a better way of saying it, I just feel like they're limited, Adam, in what they really can do. But by the same token, I think they don't do a really good job at all. They don't do a really good job of trying to figure out what their team does well and what their team is capable of doing, given all of the different what I would call shortcomings they have. It's really kind of interesting to watch, but when you've got the weapons they have, you got to figure out a better way to, go out and give, you got to figure out a better way to go out and give your team a chance to move the ball and score and win shootouts or win games where the point, when the other team gets into the 25s, 27, 28. I think that's an important thing for this team is, they have to continually control the score in order to have a chance to win. And that's probably a hard way to do it, isn't it? Every single week, you've got to control the score and make sure it doesn't get into a certain range where you're just not capable of scoring that many points.
Well, and they ran it 36 times today. I think that transitions into my next question. Well, Paul, they ran the ball 36 times. I think going into that final drive, they'd thrown it 24. You would have thought they were winning the game. Right? They were just so committed to it. And on one level, you can say they had a nice day running the ball. But you got 55 of your 186 yards on the one play to Kenny Gainwell on the fake tush push, which, I mean, credit to Arthur Smith for that one, having that one in the bag. But, you know, like they say in the Game of Thrones scene, you can only play the trick once, and that is seemingly how it went for the running game today, because if you take that play out, I did the math, they would have had the 35 carries averaging 3.7 yards. I don't know that is good enough to have justified relying on the running game as much as they did, Paul.
Well, and I think the thing about it, especially in the fourth quarter, Adam, it felt like they probably, it felt like if you didn't know what the score of the game was, that they must have been winning the game. That's what it felt like. They were content to kind of go at a snail's pace when, you know what, you're down, you're losing. And when you're losing, you know what, it's nice that you can run the ball and possess the ball and all that good stuff, but by the same token, you need as many possessions as you can possibly have. And I think that's one of my biggest issues with the Steelers' philosophy overall is that, they're not usually very good at transitioning to playing a different style of game where, hey, we need to score points. We need to make sure that we are scoring at a level that is scoring at a level that is commensurate with whatever the other team is. We need to move the clock. We need all that stuff. That's one of the biggest problems I have with they're not good at doing that.
Paul, before we move on here and talk about the defense a little bit, a lot of people in the chat talking about Aaron Rodgers, him not playing, how the Steelers should have started him instead of Mason Rudolph. I'll give you my take and I'll let you respond. I think the fact that he didn't dress today indicates that he was never going to play today, or that he wasn't close to playing today unless they got to Chicago. He got out there today and felt really good. Because we've seen them use Ben Roethlisberger in that emergency quarterback situation of, we're going to start the backup. Ben's in uniform, which is better than whatever our third string is. We're willing to take that chance if it comes to it, but we're not going to start Ben knowing he's not 100%. They've done that. The fact that they didn't, to me, tells me Aaron Rodgers really wasn't in the conversation as much as it might have seemed externally.
Yeah, or basically, honestly, maybe he actually was close, and we don't know this because we haven't been privy to this, but he basically said he didn't want to be the backup today. If he's not going to start, then let Will Howard be the backup and all that other stuff. I mean, I don't know. I mean, these kinds of conversations, when you've got a quote unquote Hall of Fame quarterback, sometimes they dictate stuff that other guys couldn't dictate. You know what I mean? And I think that's where we're at with him. Honestly, we're at a situation with him where I think he can dictate a lot of what he wants to do. And so it feels like to me, if he wasn't that close to playing, then they really spent a lot of wasted energy this week trying to make it look like he was, and even a lot of the guys that covered the Steelers were kind of surprised that he didn't play based on what they saw at practice. So I feel like, if he wasn't really close to playing or he wasn't going to play, they should have just basically said it on Wednesday, and allowed Howard and Rudolph to really get ready to play for 3 or 4 days so that in case something happened to Rudolph, Howard would have been ready. But to me, I look at Aaron Rodgers' injury and I just kind of wonder, what's going to be different next week that, other than maybe he'll be a little bit less sore. I don't know. He's still going to have the same issues. He's still going to have the same issues with his left wrist. He's still going to have the same issues trying to hand the football off, which is what they were saying. Well, we're worried because he's going to have to hand it off with his right hand or whatever. I mean, I don't know, Adam. What's going to be different between now and next week when you've got a fracture or broken wrist or whatever it is that's not going to heal for 3 or 4 weeks?
That's a good question, Paul. I don't have enough of a medical background to know. Maybe you think that if it heals enough, you can protect it a little better a week from now. You're 2 weeks post-injury at that point. So what, you'd be halfway through the recovery window. And we see guys undershoot the recovery window all the time, and maybe they were just a little too aggressive with the estimate this time around. So we'll see how that goes. Paul, before we move on from the offense, did just want to ask you briefly as well. They go for the tush push on the 4th and 1 in the first half, get stoned, basically gave up 3 points, which ended up being huge. Then they come right back around and use it, and I thought a very creative way to set up the Kenny Gainwell long run. What is your feeling about their 4th down package currently and the decision to go for it there? It looked like it was a little disjointed, that 4th and 1 that they got stuffed on. And I still have a problem too. I said this last week with having a quarterback on the field to just stand there and watch. You're allowed to have 11 players on the field. You should have 11 guys in there to run the tush push. Pull Mason Rudolph out of the game. But anyway,
especially since any kind of deception that you are going to try and use is going to be based on the fact that you're running a tush push. So it's not like, you know what I mean? It's not like you need a quarterback in there to do some kind of play action or do something crazy. No matter what you do off of that, everybody knows if Connor Heyward is lining up, it's going to be either a tush push or what they did with it today, to score a touchdown or get close to a touchdown or whatever. The reality is, I agree with you. If you're going to do it, do it. Or just have Mason Rudolph do the tush push. I'm not sure I understand why you have to have Connor Heyward. I get it with Rodgers, but you mean to tell me Mason Rudolph can't, get a half a yard or a yard or whatever? Just keep him in there, and at least you keep some semblance of the you keep some semblance of the chance that you might throw the ball there. But if you're not going to do that, I agree with you. Just take him off the field, put another big body out there, and allow that to be the way that you go about it. I know people were upset at the spot and thought, listen, if you're gonna go for it on 4th and short, and it's a bunch of bodies that are just smashing into each other there, the referees are guessing, and I would be willing to bet over the course of time you're going to get your share of, okay, he made it, and you're going to get your share of he didn't make it. So I don't blame the refs for that. I watched it a couple of times from a couple of different angles. It didn't feel like he made it to me, but maybe he did. But you're right. Put another guy out there that is actually going to be a functional player.
I agree, Paul. Let's get into the defense here before we do want to thank another couple of sponsors. Savitas Kane and Gallucci are Pittsburgh's mesothelioma and asbestos attorneys, standing up for victims of mesothelioma and asbestos cancers. They have over 85 years of experience. They know how to uncover the truth. They have the experience you need, the commitment your family deserves. They've recovered millions for individuals affected by mesothelioma and other cancers due to asbestos exposure. Call them toll-free at 1-877-227-6558 or visit them online at sdklaw.com. We also want to encourage you to check out the Steelers' latest AFC North title odds over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Obviously, that race is now dead even. We'll talk about that in a little bit before we wrap up the show. But if you're still somehow optimistic about the Steelers winning this AFC North, head over to FanDuel. Check out your odds over there. Paul, let's start here with the defense. I thought we had, we thought we had proof of concept with the pass defense and the adjustments they made last week, but Caleb Williams put a real dent into that notion today. I think wasn't terribly efficient, didn't exactly look like, Joe Flacco did in that game that kind of broke everyone's brains a few weeks ago against the Bengals. He finishes 19 of 35, 239 yards. 3 touchdowns, but only averaged 6.8 yards per attempt, finished with a 104.3 passer rating. I think the thing that stood out to me, Paul, was that he was hitting the passes he needed to when he needed to move the ball and keep that Bears offense moving. Definitely missed some throws, but he bounced back from them well, and the Steelers gave him the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I think, one of the things, I don't know, what do you think of him? Well, but before this game started, what did you think of him?
I think he's probably a little bit better than average. I don't know that he's lived up quite to the hype of being the 1-1 that he was and the consensus 1-1. I think he's a better situation than they had there with Justin Fields. I don't know about you, but I can see it potentially happening, but I don't think he was the best quarterback the Steelers have seen all season at this point either. And so the fact that he wasn't terribly efficient, but still gained yardage, I think he played about what I expected him to. I thought the Steelers would contain a few more of those big plays.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing I would tell you is I just am not sold on him. There's something about him that I'm not sold on. I don't know what it is. And I felt like today that the Steelers, and maybe it's just sort of a perception thing, but when the Steelers' backs were against the wall and they knew it against the Bengals, last week their game plan was what? Come after and go after Joe Flacco as much as they possibly could. When they played the Colts, and that was a game where it felt like, you know what, they were sliding and they needed a win, they came after Daniel Jones. And they made it really difficult on him. They showed him stuff that he hadn't seen. I felt like today they were back to being passive for some reason. And they allowed Caleb Williams to be comfortable back there. And, you know, to me, he's the kind of guy I think you want to put a lot of pressure on. He's the kind of guy that you want to get after. He's the kind of guy you want to get to make mistakes. That's what I would tell you. I think that's the thing that probably bothers me the most is it never feels like this defense wants to really go after guys week after week after week after week. It's almost like, well, we have to win this game, so therefore let's really get after it. I mean, Caleb Williams was not really under a lot of pressure and duress all game long, I don't think. I thought he was just kind of okay. I don't think he was special, but he was able to make some throws when they needed him to. And the Steelers gave up way too much space at times. I thought, you know, the middle of the field was wide open for a lot of the game for some reason. And that speaks to me to a defense that was probably more passive than anything else.
Well, and you were rewarded with the strip sack of Caleb Williams in the end zone with that blitz. You know, what was that still in the first quarter where you scored that touchdown, Paul?
Right.
So they made some plays off of it, but you're right. The pressure just did not seem consistent, and it seemed like a deliberate choice. Then again, I think you can also make the argument that the front seven was not great today. Situationally, it seemed like I felt like Kyle Monunga ran for like 150 yards today. You look down at the box score, he only gets 48 on 12 carries and the touchdown. But with that one touchdown drive that he scored on, they were just getting hammered, it seemed. But it didn't matter of they weren't playing well, and Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin knew it. And so that made them hesitant to kind of rush the passer as much? Or why do you think that it was that they made that call?
I mean, again, it's baffling to me, right? It's baffling to me what this team does. There's so many things about what this team does that I don't understand, that I feel like what works for them is defensively when they're very aggressive. That's what works for them. When they're not very aggressive, they're not very good at them. They're easy to pick apart. They're easy to, they give up big chunk plays in the passing game. They give up plays. But when they're aggressive and when they go after it, they become a much more difficult animal to deal with. But like, it seems like there's times when this team does what you want them to do, but only when their backs are against the wall. It's the strangest thing ever this year with this team, where, you look at their defense in general over time, they've been a defense that likes to be very aggressive, but not today. Not today for whatever reason, and not in a lot of games this year. It's almost like they're waiting for TJ Watt to, find the fountain of youth and become TJ Watt. They're waiting for Cam Heyward to become, Cam Heyward. They're waiting for like these guys up front to make great individual plays when it's pretty clear that is not happening this year.
But you got one today, Paul, and you have set them loose the last couple of weeks. You've had all these sacks. So I guess
that's what I mean. And then today, I don't think they were very aggressive today. I thought that they went back to being, well, we're going to cover. We're going to cover, and we're just going to make plays with our secondary and everything else. I didn't feel like they really went after the quarterback today like they had the last couple of weeks, or at least last week, and especially against the Colts, where they really just said basically, we're not going to let Daniel Jones, we're not going to let Joe Flacco feel comfortable at any point in this game. I just don't feel like they did that this week.
Well, and they sent guys after. I mean, it didn't work quite as well, but they did send guys after Justin Herbert, and you came out of that game feeling okay. They lost, but the offense was the problem in that game. The defense played well enough to give you a chance to win. The offense did not, and so even coming out of that game, I think we felt a little bit better, certainly than we do right now. In terms of TJ Watt, is it just a matter of they're not being aggressive with him anymore, or is it that he's not, that they're expecting him to make plays by covering and saying we're going to cover and we're going to unleash TJ Watt that way, and he's just not doing it? I'm curious how you view how they're using him individually.
I've heard a lot of different things. I've heard people say, oh, well, they need to move him from side to side. They need to do this, do a couple of things. Listen, he's your $90 million guy. And I just think, Adam, with respect to him, he's not having a great season. It's okay to say it. I mean, could they do some things maybe to unleash him a little bit? Maybe. But look, I've watched a number of plays this year, Adam, where he has not been double teamed. He has not been chipped. He has not been all the other things. And he just hasn't been, they've been able to stone him with one guy. He's just not having the kind of year that you need from him being your $90 million guy, period. And that's the whole point. And I think that's important to remember that. He's your $90 million guy. Those are the guys that you need to make plays individually without you helping them out. That's why they get paid like that. I think, and I could be shown, maybe I'll be foolish when I say this, Adam, but I thought this midway through last year. I think that Father Time has caught up to him a little bit. And I don't know that we will ever see that dominant player that he was. And so if he's not, that means you've got to figure out ways to unleash him and get him so where he's still going to make big plays, not just one a game or two a game here and there, but consistently throughout a game where you remember in his heyday and when he was in his prime, Adam, he dominated games, completely took games over, completely. And made it so the other team absolutely had to worry about him on every single play. It's not the case right now. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm not saying, he can't be still effective. I'm saying when you have a superstar that's paid like he's paid, that's, been a, defensive player of the year and all the other stuff, you have to, recognize, and you and I have talked about this a little bit. Tomlin sometimes gets a blind spot for veteran guys with big names. You have to recognize that maybe he is not quite where he was. So what do we have to do to get him back into the game where he can be a big part of what we're doing on defense? So I do think they need to try and do some different things with him, because what they're doing right now is it looks like they're relying on him just to be TJ Watt. And guess what? He might not ever be TJ Watt again.
Well, and to that point, Paul, you did get the big play today with him. How many of those plays is this defense predicated on him getting? And I think that's kind of maybe where the bigger problem is you see a little bit worse than he was in his prime, maybe. But even when you're getting the big plays at times, on a down-to-down basis, it seems like you're over-reliant on that happening, 3, 4, 5 times a game like it did in his prime. And you're right. They just seem a little pot committed to the idea of him being able to do it over and over and over and not being able to be satisfied with getting a touchdown off of him like you did today. Paul, let's talk a little bit about third downs here. Bears finished 7 of 13 on third downs, 1 of 1 on fourth downs. So they were pretty efficient, Paul, converting over 50% of the time. I think that's another concern I have about this defense is that it can get – they've been setting up a lot of third downs. They aren't just terrible down in, down out, but they cannot get off the field, especially in these losses. When they do it well, they win. When they don't, they lose. And I know that's the conversation we have about the turnovers, but I bet you if you graphed the third downs the same way, it would be the same trend. And I think that's probably true. I don't think I'm breaking any news here. That is true for many football teams. It's just I think it is somehow striking how effective they can be on first and second down and then still not get off the field on third down.
Right. I mean, that to me, I think is really in so many ways frustrating with his defense is I don't have it in front of me and I don't know, but it feels like, Adam, if they're 3rd and 8 or longer, it feels like the other team is like 80%, 90% going to convert. And I don't know. I just don't understand how that can be. You work hard on 1st and 2nd down to put the other team in 3rd and long. And they're just not good at converting. For whatever reason, they're not good at getting off the field in those situations. And you would think this defense, the way that it's built and what they're built to do, you would think this defense would be better on 3rd down. And they're just not. And they haven't been all year. That's very frustrating. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I feel like this is a defense that really on 3rd down should be able to get off the field more than it does. The other part of it is, in those situations, they play a lot of it feels like they play a lot, and this is Mike Tomlin, they play a lot of really conservative coverages and whatnot, And to me, it's kind of like, again, why not just go after these offenses? Because you laying back and standing back and covering with 7 or 8 guys, it's not working. No matter what you want to say, it's not working. It's frustrating. I mean, this is the most frustrating team I can remember covering or watching or whatever, just from the standpoint of they don't do the things that they're good at enough. And they don't seem to do them until they absolutely have to.
I agree, Paul. Let's widen the aperture here a little bit. What did you think of that Bears team we saw today? I think there's been a question of how legitimate they are in the NFC, how good of a team that they are. Was this a winnable game that the Steelers let get away, or can you just look at the Bears that you saw today and say, they were a good team, Steelers were a decent team, the better team won today, and you can kind of move on from this one? I definitely don't think that this was a hair-on-fire loss for them. I think that was a pretty solid team that they played today, and they just lost on the road. I think there were some other games earlier in the season that if you didn't get away, we don't have our hair on fire now, because now it is a somewhat bleak situation. You've given up the entire AFC North lead. But I don't see the season unraveling because of this particular loss. I think it may have unraveled a little bit earlier than that.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, it's going to be magnified because, now we're in the stretch run and every game matters and every game's important. I mean, the reality is you lost on the road to a 7-win team. So it's not like this is losing at home to, some awful team. The other reality is it's an NFC loss. So that takes a little of this thing out of it, just a little bit of it. But this is a winnable game. I mean, I don't know that I saw anything from the Bears that suggested they were unbeatable or that they were better, that much better than the Steelers or anything like that. Again, I think I said it earlier this week. This is one of those games where as long as you just play a clean football game, you'll probably win. Well, they didn't play a clean football game, right? They had a strip sack and they had an interception and they, gave up a couple of long passes or whatever. I mean, they weren't clean. And so when you don't play a clean game against a good team on the road, this is what happens. It's what happens every time. So I feel like it's going to be important now for the Steelers to just clean up a little bit of the, the mistakes they make and those kind of things. But because it's an NFC game, because it's a road game against a good team, I don't know that it's a killer loss. There's a couple of weeks from now, if you lose to the Browns at home, that's a killer loss. AFC game, bad team at home. That's a killer loss, but this one, should they or could they have won? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think they're as good, if not better than the Bears. But like you said, if you keep it in perspective, it's not the worst loss they've had. It just came at a bad time because, the Ravens won today. So now, you're tied with them and all the other good stuff. But to me, I think they can recover from it because they still play the Ravens twice.
Yeah, to me, Paul, I would say the greatest sins this season were the loss on the road to the Bengals on that Thursday night game, and then the loss to the Packers at home, where you had some things going your way, but you simply could not stop that tight end. Those were both worse in my mind. I'd maybe even throw the Chargers loss in there because you were just so terrible offensively in a way that, seemed preventable. this one, I thought there were enough good things going on that you can at least say you played decently and you just lost. That happens in the NFL, but you put yourself in a position for this one to hurt so much worse by losing some of those games earlier in the season. Let's talk a little bit about the AFC North, and I guess we've got to start talking about the wild card situation, Paul, because it feels like the AFC North is slipping away. It feels like the Ravens are going to possibly run away with this thing. They've made up, 4 games already, and you still have 6 weeks to go here. Do you give the Steelers any chance to win the division at this point, being even with the team that I think we both think is better than them? And B, given all the other teams that are in that wild card pot, which are going to include your Bills next week, and what's becoming a huge game, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, everyone's kind of counting them out, but they're still the Chiefs. They have things that the Steelers don't. I think it's rapidly becoming a situation where there's enough good teams in the AFC that the Steelers may end up in that 9-7 or whatever, 9-win, 10-win situation and still not make it.
Well, and I think that, I was looking over my shoulder. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Chiefs won today, didn't they? They just won in overtime over the Colts. So, to me, it's like one of those things where it's going to be very, very interesting now, because I think I saw it, I looked over my shoulder real quickly, briefly, but I think if the playoffs began today, the Steelers would be out. And so, yes. You look at the Steelers, but again, the good news is they play the Bills. They play 2 against the Ravens. They play some of the teams that are ahead of them. They still have the Browns and the Dolphins games. I mean, I think there's enough meat on the bone for them that I do expect them to be able to have a chance to make the playoffs. I mean, they have the same record as the Chiefs, right? What we're not talking about, we're talking about the Chargers and the Chiefs a lot. But, Jacksonville and Houston and in that division with the Colts, there's, a number of teams that you got to worry about in terms of, playoff implications and whatnot. And because, we keep talking about the Bills, but we forget that the Bills right now are in second place and likely not going to win their division, which is bad for the Steelers, because the team that the Steelers beat, that the Steelers beat, that could be from that division, that could have been that could have been a team that they would have a tiebreaker against, is the Colts. Well, it's the Patriots. So if you think about it from the standpoint of if the Patriots and Colts win their division, well, guess what? Those 2 quote-unquote tiebreaker wins don't necessarily mean a whole lot, do they, for the Steelers, because they aren't in the mix for the wild card. So if I'm looking at it right now, and of course there's games still going on and things can change, but as of right now, the Steelers are currently 8th, and only 7 teams make it. So that's
I think more than that, Paul, if you look at the standings right now, there are 10 teams in the AFC at 6-5 or better.
Right.
Where do you think the Steelers are better than 3 of those teams? I'm not convinced that they are. I know we can talk about Jacksonville and Houston as somewhat unproven commodities. But look, the Texans just beat the Bills. So if you don't beat the Bills next week, with the Bills have a lot of guys injured. I just did our preview that's going to be on postgazette.com there of a preview of the week for them. Couple top receivers are out. They just lost a linebacker for an already terrible run defense. If you lose at home and the Texans have beat them at home in the same, roughly 1 week span, how can you make an argument that you're better than the Texans or anyone else that's in this mix? Because I looked at that group and I say, I think the Steelers are maybe the worst team.
Right.
And you've already lost to the Chargers. And if you lose next week, you'll have lost to the Bills. I don't see the argument for them being good enough to overcome to get in unless you start winning right now. Like, they've run out of runway. This is it.
Right. And I think that's the big thing. You look at the Bills game, I think the Bills game is really, really crucial in my mind for the Steelers. I think they have to win the Bills game. If they lose the Bills game, I don't think they'll make the playoffs, honestly. I think they have an opportunity to beat the Bills, if you beat the Bills, I think that's good. But the reality is, if you lose to the Bills, I think it's, you're at best going to split with Baltimore, probably lose at Detroit. Now you're talking about maybe 9-8 at the best. And that's assuming that you can beat the Browns and Dolphins, which you should. But you know what I'm saying? To me, I don't know, man. I think if you look at it from that standpoint, this is going to be difficult. And I think one of the things that's also difficult, the Bears were missing a lot of guys today, and you lost to them. That to me, if you lose to the Bills, I think it's almost assuredly that you are going to be 8-9, which I know would, cause all kinds of meltdowns around here. But I think almost assuredly you're going to be 8-9. And that's, obviously not going to make the playoffs. I'm not even sure 9-8 is going to make the playoffs, to be honest. And the thing I always go back to with Baltimore, right, is now that they're even with the Steelers, for a long time it was, well, all the Steelers have to do is split with Baltimore, right? But if you think about it, Baltimore's got some tough games. But now it feels like if they split with the Steelers, they'll probably win the division.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that they're in the position to be able to play that way because their schedule was so tough up front. Now the Steelers are in the position of you're going to have to win those games that the Ravens lost. You're going to have to beat the Bills. You're going to have to beat the Lions. Those are the ones that put the Ravens in the hole. They've now made that up, and it's only going to get easier for them. It's only getting harder for you, although I think that Detroit has looked human at times. I don't think the Steelers absolutely are going to lose to any of these teams the rest of the way, but I also don't know which ones they're going to beat, and I think that's the biggest problem. Let's finish the show on this, Paul. Does Aaron Rodgers have to play next week? If we both agree that they are in a close to a must-win situation here with a 42-year-old quarterback that you've invested your whole season in, does he have to play even if he's not at 100% based on what you saw today?
No, I think they just need to let – and again, I'm not saying that Mason Rudolph is better than him. I'm just saying, to be honest, you know what? Mason Rudolph played well enough today that they could have won the game, and that's what you get from him. He is you're basically a guy who is a backup quarterback who is probably good enough to win games for you. So yeah, I don't have a problem with Mason Rudolph if you have to play next week. Their defense has to be better, and I think they need to let him play a little bit more to his strengths.
Well, we'll see how that unfolds. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Hop on board. We'll have a lot more content coming your way. Ray Fittipaldo, Jerry Dulac will be reporting from Soldier Field a little bit later this evening. We'll also have locker room reaction. Brian Bacco has teased to me in our PG Slack channel that things were spicy between Patrick Queen and Jalen Ramsey, so we're going to get that video footage up to you. So there's a hard tease. Subscribe to the channel. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that. And please consider checking out our written coverage over at post-gazette.com. We appreciate you hopping on with us today, and we will talk to you again next week after Steelers Bills.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.